Mustang Mach 1.
In 1969, the American automotive landscape was shifting beneath the feet of the Big Three. While the original Mustang had defined the pony car segment just 5 years earlier, the escalating horsepower wars had moved the goalposts. Ford needed something more aggressive than the standard GT, a car that could bridge the gap between a daily driver and a track-ready beast. That answer arrived in the form of the Mach 1, a car that would go on to outsell the Mustang GT by nearly 15-1 in its debut year alone, effectively redefining the performance Mustang for a generation. 1969 was the year America reached for the stars, and Ford decided to reach for the throat of the muscle car market. We've all heard of the Boss 302 and the Boss 429, the blue-chip legends that sell for six figures at major auctions today. But while the world was looking at the Boss, the Mach 1 was the car actually winning the stoplight Grand Prix on every main street in the United States. It was supposed to be the definitive American icon for decades to come. Instead, it became a victim of its own success, caught in a perfect storm of corporate ego, rising insurance premiums, and a changing world that no longer had an appetite for pure, unadulterated speed. Before the Mach 1, Ford was actually in a bit of a bind. The original Mustang GT was getting long in the tooth, and the segment was being invaded by heavy hitters like the Plymouth Roadrunner and the Dodge Charger. Ford needed something that looked fast, standing still. They needed a car that captured the jet age obsession of the late 60s. Enter the SportsRoof body style. The Mach 1 wasn't just a trim level, it was an identity. It featured a competition suspension, twin color-keyed racing mirrors, and that iconic shaker hood scoop that actually poked through a hole in the hood to gulp down cold air. It was aggressive, it was wide, and it looked like it was doing 100 miles per hour while parked in a suburban driveway.
But here's where it gets crazy. Most people think the Mustang was always a guaranteed hit, but the Mach 1 actually killed its own sibling. In 1969 alone, Ford sold over 72,000 Mach 1s. Meanwhile, the standard Mustang GT, it only moved about 5,000 units. The Mach 1 was so dominant, so culturally cool, that it effectively murdered the GT nameplate for over a decade. Ford had caught lightning in a bottle. But as they were about to realize, lightning is a very hard thing to hold on to when the weather starts to change. If you popped the hood of a top-tier 69 Mach 1, you weren't just looking at an engine, you were looking at a masterpiece of American engineering, the 428 Cobra Jet. This was a 7.0-liter monster, officially rated at 335 horsepower, but everyone in the know and every insurance company in the country knew that was a total lie. In reality, these engines were pushing closer to 410 horsepower and a staggering 440 pound-feet of torque. It featured a Holley 4-barrel carburetor and a cast-iron tailpipe that emitted a sound like rolling thunder. If you opted for the drag pack, Ford gave you the Super Cobra Jet, which included a heavy-duty oil cooler and strengthened internals for the sole purpose of surviving 4,000 RPM launches at the local drag strip. But it wasn't just about the brute force. Ford was playing a clever game with the Mach 1. They wanted to attract the guy who wanted to go fast, but also the guy who wanted to feel like he'd finally made it. Inside, the Mach 1 was a gentleman's muscle car. You had the deluxe interior with high-back bucket seats, teakwood grain accents on the dash and doors, and extra sound deadening that made it feel more like a Thunderbird than a bare-bones racer. It was the first time a car felt like a luxury cruiser and a NASCAR contender at the same time. You could take it to the grocery store on Saturday and the drag strip on Sunday without changing a single thing. And that's when things went wrong. You see, the Mach 1 was born at the absolute peak of American excess. In the late 60s, the muscle wars were at a fever pitch. The Mach 1 was Ford's ultimate weapon in the street racing culture that defined a generation. It was the era of win on Sunday, sell on Monday. If a Mach 1 beat a Chevelle on Woodard Avenue, Ford dealerships would see a surge in foot traffic the next morning. It represented a time when gas was 35 cents a gallon, the roads were open, and the only limit to how fast you could go was your own nerve. But that optimism was about to hit a brick wall.
Most people miss this part of the story, but the 1969 Mach 1 was a design peak that Ford couldn't figure out how to follow. For the 1971 model year, Ford made a fatal mistake. They made the Mustang bigger, much bigger. They called it the flatback look. It was wider, heavier, and lacked the nimble, aggressive proportions of the 69. It lost the spirit of the pony car. It was as if Ford tried to turn a middleweight boxer into a heavyweight wrestler, and the fans hated it. The 1969 Mach 1 didn't fail because it was a bad car. It was simply too good for a world about to change. A perfect storm of federal emissions regulations and the phase-out of high-octane fuel forced Ford to drop compression ratios, turning former predators into house cats. Simultaneously, insurance premiums skyrocketed, sometimes exceeding the car payment itself. By the 1973 oil crisis, the 7-liter V8 was no longer a badge of honor, it was a liability. The muscle era wasn't just over, it was executed. While the Mach 1 name lingered through the uninspiring Mustang 2 years, the 1969 remained the undisputed zenith. Today, a numbers-matching 428 Cobra Jet R code can fetch $150,000 as collectors crave the raw power and sleek proportions lost when Ford moved toward bloated luxury barges in 1971. But here's the twist. The Mach 1 was never meant to be a permanent fixture. It was designed as a temporary placeholder styling package to keep interest high. Ford was shocked when it became an accidental legend, outselling nearly every other performance option. Had they leaned into its balance of power and size, it could have been a standalone sub-brand like the Corvette. For those who remember the vibration of a shaker hood at a green light, the 1969 Mach 1 remains the final roar of an era where horsepower was king. It was a high-octane rebel that defined a generation. Did you have one in your driveway, or was it the one that got away? Tell us your story below, and subscribe for more deep dives into the legends of American iron.